Sir, so we are live. I'm going to bring up the PPT now.
Okay, yes, sir.
Sir, we are live now.
Thank you, sir. A very warm welcome to everyone presenting in this webinar. I would like to welcome our distinguished speakers, Mr. Maganjit Singh, Mr. Gagan Sharma, our Dean, Professor Dr. Garima Prakash, and Director Hotel India, Mr. Laurent Hill. I am Saif Anju, an assistant professor at Martin Hotel and Tourism Business School, Chancellor University, which is one of the leading universities in Delhi NCR. Welcome to you all. The theme of today's webinar is Sommelier, a way of life, in which our key speakers will share their experience in the field of wine and beverage. That sommelier can be a genius of the modern science, and what actually the role of sommelier in today's hospitality trade. Measure and gather knowledge and how to become a recognized sommelier, and one can be an entrepreneur and a brand ambassador in
Yes,
the
ma'am.
field of beverages, especially when we talk about a wine. Now, I'd like to invite our Dean, Professor Dr. Garima Prakash, to commence the webinar. Ma'am.
Good evening to everybody, and Mr. Magandeep and Mr. Gagan Sharma, thank you so much for initiating this, and we are really highly obliged that you're a part of it. And as Lauro sir said, that obviously we need to have, once this all is behind us, we need to meet in person and we need to connect over a glass of wine with our children around, with our students around. That will be much more vibrant and buzzing. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and being a part of this webinar. We are highly, highly obliged. I welcome you on behalf of Hansel. I welcome you on behalf of Atel, and I personally welcome you. Thank you so much.
Sir, so you're there?
Sir, you're mute. Please unmute yourself.
Sir, please continue.
Okay. Now, I take the opportunity to introduce our first key speaker of the webinar, Mr. Maganjit Singh. Mr. Maganjit Singh is a graduate from IIT Mumbai. He pursued a sommelier course from Rhone Valley of France and an alumni of Hotel Names. He is India's first French qualified sommelier and professional wine taster. This is a list of Mr. Maganjit's achievements, but a few are: Mr. Magan is also the ambassador to India for the top German estates, which are grouped under VDP. He has written 2 award-winning books as well. The most recent one being is the Indian Spirit, the history of wine, of alcohol in India. He is also the founder of India's first ever accredited wine and beverage school, as of wine and beverage studies, and a conducting of workshops and Indian sommelier championships is always a part of his agenda. Now, I would like to introduce our second key speaker, Mr. Gagan Sharma. He is a graduate from Institute of Hotel Management. He has received a degree of Master in Hospitality Studies from Victoria University, Australia, and also obtained a diploma level 4 from Wine and Spirit Education Trust, United Kingdom. He has also done a wine specialization course from French wine scholar, United States. Mr. Gagan is a managing director of Institute of Wine and Beverage Studies. He has received recognition in various platforms, such as he is a partner at Indian Sommelier Championship Hungary. He was a wine specialist and media board member for multiple years in Italy. There are just a few. He organized various workshops, championships, and always gives chance to F&B professionals to prove themselves in the field of wine and spirit and provide platform for upcoming and F&B professionals as a sommelier. I'll welcome you also, Magan sir and Gagan sir.
Gagan sir, I'm giving you the rights. Just a second. Yes, sir, you have the rights now. You can share the PowerPoint.
Okay. All right. I think we've been doing this for a while. Hi, everyone. And it never gets old, or we never get used to it. We still prefer being in a room with people around us. And we wish to see them falling asleep to our presentations rather than just knowing they're sleeping behind a screen. It's not on in the classroom. But this is more lively and interactive. Request also to mute the mic. I think there's a background noise coming. I don't know where it's. Hi. Yeah, perfect. Okay, guys. So when we are starting this thing, you know, we always talk about sommelier and sommelier as a way of life, and people think sommelier is a very cushy job. You get paid to drink, and it's so cool. But actually, there's a lot more to it, guys. There's a lot more that goes into being a sommelier. So we thought we'll today talk about what it is to be a sommelier, how can you become one, and what are the skill sets and the requirements to be a good sommelier. So let's start with a very basic question. If you were to ask in a classroom that who is a sommelier, you will find that the answer unanimously comes back as a sommelier is a wine waiter. It's someone who will basically serve me my wine, right? So that's the general question. The slides are not changing. Yep. Okay, it's working. Yeah. So you'll always get an answer that it's a wine waiter as a sommelier, basically a person whose job is, as you'll see in the next slide, identify a bottle of wine, procure that wine, put up the wine glasses on the table, talk a bit about the wine by telling you the grape and the vintage and the region, and then open the bottle with a very fancy opener and serve it to you. And that's what we think is the job of a sommelier traditionally. And in a very traditional, frugal sense, that would have been the job of a sommelier. Today, it's changed a lot. Okay, and this is what we'll talk about today. So today we can start with one thing, that in the industry, a sommelier is not just a wine waiter. If you're only a wine waiter, you will never be able to justify your salary or make a career out of it. It's not career worthy. You want to have a lot more skill sets aligned with knowing wines, then you can only be calling yourself a sommelier today. So in the next slide, now you'll see a picture of a very dashing young gentleman. This gentleman dressed in an impeccable suit, holding a glass of wine, the polished shoes. He could be the general manager, could he be an entrepreneur, could he be a top management person? Well, he is a sommelier. Okay, the sommelier's image is a very well cultivated, very enriched image, because remember, you have to look a certain way. But imagine in a restaurant, a chef is someone who wears a chef coat and he or she cooks. Now, whether you are in the pastry section or you're in the main section or the garde manger, when you walk out into the salon of a restaurant, it's all the same. We have the data, please. It's not showing up here, I think. Yeah. So people will think if you're in a chef coat, you are someone who cooks in the larger sense of the term. Similarly, a mixologist, you'll see someone with armbands, maybe suspenders, a bow tie, or a white jacket behind the bar. Whether they are stacking the shelves or making the cocktails for you, all mixologists. And as a client, a mixologist is expected for them to make drinks. And then servers follow the very logistical task of fulfilling the task of transporting goods from the kitchen to the table, or from the table to the back area, and that's servers. So everything else that we've left out in this definition traditionally did not belong to a sommelier, but now in a contemporary sense it does. Which means when a guest walks in and seats himself or herself at a table, and they want to have a cocktail or an aperitif, or they want to have a whiskey on the rocks, or they want to have a wine or an after dinner drink, everything belongs to the sommelier. If they want a recommendation of a dish to go with their drink, it belongs to the sommelier. So largely the role of a sommelier is definitely not a wine waiter. And at the ISC, the Indian Sommelier Championship, we always say this, that, I've skipped it, but we'll talk about that also, but it's a lot more than that. So if you can eat it, drink it, or serve it, you need to know it. And that is what a sommelier is now about. So basically, we defined who a sommelier is. We saw that lovely picture of Andreas Larsen looking very, very flashy in a suit. What is a sommelier is not just a wine waiter. It has to be a person that's much more, goes beyond the knowledge of just the wines. Now, here comes what is that knowledge. So we'll see 3 slides now, which will talk about the constant knowledge that a sommelier needs to have. And this is only the wine world, but applies to the beverage world as well. This here is a vineyard. It's got a tree on top of a hill. The vineyard's planted along the slope. It's dusk or dawn, slightly over cloud. It's a slightly cloudier sky. That is all I can tell, even as a sommelier. But right now, to know exactly which vineyard it is, what are the grapes, what's the kind of wine, the pricing, availability, I will need to study and delve further into this picture. In the next picture now, you'll see the second part of the equation, which are grapes. And with grapes as well, you'll find that everything that you do with grapes, you need to know about them. And there are about 100 grapes on any average wine list that are used. There can be 300 on the big wine lists. But remember, there are almost 100,000 grapes in the families out there of grapes from which you can make wine. And we need to know as sommeliers at least 150, 200 of them really well. We need to know about the grape, where it comes from, what's the kind of wine, where do you grow it, how is it grown. And here in this picture, you cannot tell much. It is very static. And yet it tells you about how large that picture is. And once you've got the vineyard and the grapes, eventually it'll end up in the third picture, which is the cellar. In a cellar, I can tell something about this particular cellar, that it's got vaulted ceilings. So it might be a medieval time, so maybe 150, 200 years old, maybe even more than that. But I cannot tell much about the barrels. I know they're different sizes, they're different shapes. Are they Slavonian oak? Are they Hungarian oak? Are they French or American? I cannot tell by looking at this picture. And each time we change the kind of oak, we change the kind of wine we will get. And this applies not just to wine, but to whiskeys, brandies, cognacs, and all those beverages as well. So what I'm trying to say is that you've got three things which are constant knowledge for a beverage person, which is where the provenance, where the drink comes from, the ingredients, what it is made of, and the aging and the post making processing, the nurturing, if you wish. All these things are constant, but there's a vast field, and you have to know about 80-90% of it before you can consider yourself ready to go to the guest. And here comes the toughest bit, the guest, because this person is the most variable element in the entire equation. Is this lady seated here waiting for someone? Has she already met someone? Is she about to get a drink? Should I offer her a beer or a cocktail or a chocolate milkshake? All this you can only gain not by reading books, but through experience. So what I said before for the 3 slides, you can gain by reading up all the books, watching videos, and so on. But this part here is pure interaction. I go back to the beginning of this presentation when I said, just sort of that we love being in a room talking to people, because that has become second nature to us. It's easier to read people's faces, know if they're absorbing, know if they're liking a part of the presentation. If we can see you, makes it much easier for us. And this here is the biggest part of the equation for a sommelier, knowing all the knowledge that you have on the beverages and then distilling it down in 10 seconds as you talk to the guest and figuring out which one you should recommend to this guest at this time on this visit. So for me now, and for Gagan as well, I'm sure, a sommelier is not just a wine waiter. It is a modern genius. You need to have a lot of data at your hand and the ability to process it super fast. So if you don't do all that, you will miss out on it. And beyond that, just modern genius features one thing. You need to have 3 other skills that we feel are very valid. You have to be a time traveler. Someone asks about the 1982 vintage or the 1995 or Dom Perignon 2008. We need to know how that year was. We need to have an idea what happened in Bordeaux in 1982 in the vintage. We need to know what 62 was so special, why 47 is important in Saint-Emilion and Burgundy and so on. So that's being a time traveler. And then being a historian, because it's not enough to know just wine. It's important to be able to connect with events in history. When Napoleon did the classification of Bordeaux, what else was happening? How did phylloxera travel? Who, when, and where, and what of gin? How was it invented? Same with brandy or cognac. We need to know history, not just in context of alcohol, but in context of the world around us. So it makes for better storytelling. And that's the third bit. That once you have all this knowledge, and then you have the client in front of you, think of yourself as a good professor who can communicate this knowledge. Otherwise, it's all lost. So this, for us, is the modern genius principle of being a sommelier. Gagan, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Sure. So, so I think, yeah, all of these factors are there, and that's what our palate does, and that's what puts bread and butter on table. That we taste liquids, and we could actually take that 30 ml, 50 ml of liquid, and we can travel back in time, and weave a story, not just something that sounds fancy, but factual story. But nobody likes data. Nobody likes facts. It has to be told in a nice way, and that's why storytelling part definitely comes in handy. But beyond all of these things, you could be a good storyteller, but what actually comes down to is if you are an efficient money maker for the organization or not. And let's be very honest, I think this is what the biggest question that all of us ask once I'm done with the graduation or once I go into the industry: how much money am I going to make at what position? So at least in Indian hospitality, there is a formula that could tell you what you will be earning. And this is not written in stone, but this is a general guideline depending on various hotels and restaurants and organizations. The formula can change. That let's say your salary was to be 10,000 rupees, you'll have to bring 10 times revenue of that. So 1 lakh rupees you'll have to earn, out of which 80% should be pure profit. Now, again, as I said, this is just a general, idea. This is not written in stone. But depending on what your skill is and how much money you bring in, your salary can be decided, or you can work the other way around. It's a very, very simple idea here. So now let's see why a position of a sommelier is now becoming very important in the industry. So first thing first, if in case you were to just look at a bottle of wine, let's say you buy a bottle of wine for 2,000 rupees and you sell it on your wine list or your beverage list for 10,000 rupees. How long do you need for that bottle to be sold? Just one day, or probably just one hit at a table. You go, you propose a bottle of wine, they take it, and the job is done. Within like 10 minutes, you have earned 8,000 rupees of pure profit by selling a wine for 10,000 rupees, which was for 2,000 rupees of cost price. Probably half an hour, or let's say one day, 8,000 rupees of profit has been earned. The same thing if in case you were to apply to spirits, a bottle of spirits, it happens that in a restaurant, in a five-star hotel, a table comes and they order a spirit by bottle. So you have to sell pegs. Now 30 ml peg, 750 ml bottle, you know there will be 25 pegs in a bottle. Let's say we sell one for 600 rupees, you end up earning 15,000 rupees on that bottle, out of which 13,000 is pure profit. But statistically, again, as an average, it is said that it takes you 23 days to sell a bottle of spirit on the menu, not something in the banquet, not at the bar as a pouring brand, but generally it takes you 23 days to move a bottle of and finish it off through sales. So by the end of it, you do understand by paying 2,000 rupees, you're earning various profit levels, but then the time invested in earning that is also different. So in 23 days, by selling a bottle of spirit, I'm earning 13,000 rupees, while by doing the same with wines, I'm earning a profit of as close to about 2 lakh rupees, right? And now, if in case you were to take that as an idea as to profit defines your salary, if in case you were to put it back into this formula, I think you would very clearly understand which side of the business do you wish to be, or how does a sommelier justify these nice suits and well tailored clothes that Andreas Larsen was also wearing? How do they travel the world? How do they meet certain level of people? Now the question comes: why would anybody want to be a sommelier, at least in India? So first thing first is, I think this is a very simple idea that the industry requires this profession to be. Think about it. If you have a batch of, within your batch of, let's say 100 students or 100 professionals, ask yourself, how many people do you know in your batch who are ready to become chefs? How many of them are ready to become F&B professionals? How many of them are ready to become front office professionals? And then ask the question, how many of us are ready to become a sommelier? And that will give you a basic idea as to how many professionals are there. And then think about how many hotels and restaurants are there within the country that could require a sommelier, right? So think about the hotels that are there in Delhi, and then think about how many sommeliers are there. What I can tell you is that professionally and certified through education and through examinations, there would be barely 50 to 60 sommeliers in the world's second biggest population, which is India. And how many hotels do we have in India? And how many sommeliers do we have in India? So there's a massive gap. Industry is growing up to this idea that we do need sommeliers, and they're not just wine people or alcohol people. They could be handy when it comes to food and sales of other things as well. So first thing first is the industry requires it. The second thing is, if in case you've studied economy, you would understand very easily that the demand is very high, but the supply is very less. And when the supply is less and the demand is high, the prices go up. So that is the reason why sommelier as a skill right now is highly paid in the industry. Um, the second thing which is very good with this profession is international. When we say international, like music has a language which could be understood anywhere in the world, so is with alcohol. And the vodka definition would remain the same, be it any part of the world it is. A martini's recipe will always remain the same. But now think about it. If you are a chef, let's say you're an Indian chef, but you go and settle in Japan, would you really be as relevant? Or let's say you're a Japanese chef who goes to, Italy, would you be as relevant? But when you talk about alcohol, alcohol is relevant much everywhere, and the language that comes with alcohol study is applicable everywhere. And the third very important part is probably 15 years from today, when I was studying my hotel management and I told my parents that I want to be a sommelier. First of all, of course, they couldn't pronounce the word. But later on, when I told them that my idea would be to work with alcohol, they were not very happy with it. When I came back from Australia after my master's, again, a lot of people asked, what does your child do? And they said, yeah, he works with alcohol. And a lot of people used to raise their eyebrows. And today that doesn't exist. There are, even for religious matters or gender bias, all of that doesn't exist, at least in this profession. Do we have lady winemakers in India? Yes, we do. Do we have lady distillers in India? Yes, we do. Do we have lady brewers in India? Yes, we do. Do we have lady sommeliers in India? Oh, definitely we do have them. So overall, there's no reason why this profession should not be under your consideration, and more importantly, rather one on the top of your consideration. Simplest of reasons, there's a massive gap between what the industry requires and what exists there. And forget the money bit of it. There are other ways that you can earn. For example, you are paid to study. Scholarships are paid given to you. You are, paid to travel and learn about wines and spirits and beers in various parts of the world. And Magan and I, we guys have done that. I'm pretty sure Laurent has also done that. The winners of the Indian Sommelier Championships have not only gotten paid to study through scholarships, they've also gotten travel tickets, which I'll just share with you in a bit. But most importantly, you're paid through good company. If the best of the guests come to your restaurant or hotel, it's the sommelier's job to go and talk to them, explain them the menu, recommend the right product and take orders. So all of that comes in. So talking about sommeliers, we do the competition called the Indian Sommelier Championship, where Laurent has been a jury, and he's one of those, hard to convince sort of juries. Not a nice one, but a tough nut to crack. But then the Indian Sommelier Championship started with the idea that it will be a wine-based program, and then as we are, developing in the industry, the definition has changed from wines to spirits to beers to cocktails to food and wine, food pairings, and various other things, be it storytelling and everything. So Pankaj Balachandran was the winner of the 6th Indian Sommelier Championship. Even though he can call himself a certified sommelier, today he's the only brand ambassador of Monkey Shoulder whiskey in the country. And he's a rock star at that, doing fantastic stuff. Next year, this gentleman called Atul Tiwari won the competition. He was just a runner, a server in his restaurant at Leela Hotels. Once he won the competition, the very next day, he was promoted to be the assistant restaurant manager of the restaurant, which is Megu. Then he became the restaurant manager, assistant F&B manager, and today, in what, 5 years, he's the F&B manager or the F&B director of the Oberoi Hotels in Bombay. And he has visited, I think, more than 6 different countries. He has been to more than 40 different wineries and breweries, and he again is a champion at that. The person in the middle, next year, Harish Acharikar, he won. He was a sommelier at Four Seasons Hotel, went on to be the sommelier of the table in Bombay, and today he is a brand ambassador for Bacardi Group. He takes care of Dewar's whiskey and Bacardi rum, and he has shaped a fantastic career for himself. Next year, Prateek came, and Prateek is today the beverage manager of the entire table group, which has, I think, 5 different restaurants under him. And Wine Spectator this year awarded his wine list as the only wine list in standalone restaurants in India that was, appreciated and commended by Wine Spectator. So he's doing a great job at it. Abhas, he won the next year, I think 2 years ago, and today is the chain beverage manager for Oberoi Hotels in Bombay. Devti, she was an OCLD. She quit that. She came to the competition. She won the competition, became the first lady to lift the trophy. Today, she is the brand ambassador for Charisma Estate, which very recently won the Best Vineyards in the World award. Amongst the best vineyard, this one, only Indian winery to have won a space in the top 50. And this year, Anushka won. She used to work with us for a while. But then she went on and worked with a wine importer, and now she's a sommelier at ITC Maratha. And this is what I was saying, that you're paid to travel. As a award, she won to visit Austria. She is going to do a guest shift at a bar in Hong Kong, and she was supposed to this year represent India at the World Sommelier Championship in Australia. So in 1 year, she would have traveled 3 places as a bare minimum to various places, and then she won, I think, 6 or 7 different trips within India, from spirits to wines to beers and various other. Now, how do you become a sommelier, or how do you become a professional in the beverage space? There are various ways of doing it. One of the easiest ways of doing it is to do a certification study. We do have WSET and Code of Master Sommeliers, but they have their own pros and cons. And because I'm an alumni of both the programs, I said, why don't we pick the better parts of both of them and bridge the gap of what they do not teach you? And we started our own certifications, but then at this point in time, because nobody wants to go to a hotel and sit in a banquet and study alcohol, we started this new program called Learn from Home. And these are online recorded sessions, pretty much like Netflix and Amazon Prime. You pay your fee, you subscribe to the course, and there are videos that you can see at your own sweet pace. So the first one is the wine program, where there are, I think, about more than 7.5 hours of video content, a lot of other stuff. This is how the program looks. They are recorded sessions where you'll see either one of the bald person teaching you about, trying to teach you about wines. Then this Saturday, we are releasing the spirits program, which we're really excited about. But the most exciting thing that's going on right now is the Young Sommeliers Olympia. We do the Indian Sommelier Championship, which is only for professionals, and you have to come and sit in the classroom and learn from the professionals. But we thought, why don't we start the whole idea of teaching beverages to young professionals or future professionals while they're still at college? So if you are under the age of 21, go and check out the Olympiad. This is for people who are under 21, professionals or students. So what we are going to do is we're going to get the past ISC winners, the owners, winemakers, distillers, brewers, and industry experts, not only from India but abroad as well. We're trying to get Paolo Basso, who was conferred upon as the best sommelier in the world, to come and teach the students. Once you're done with that, you will be quizzed, and if in case you're amongst the winners, you will get a cash award of 25,000. You will be paid to study, and then you will enter into the Indian Sommelier Championship, and these guys will actually train you for 1 year so that you guys could go and make them proud and win the competition and probably travel abroad after that. So so these are some of the things that we are doing. But then, bottom line remains: should you become a sommelier or not? We highly recommend that you at least consider this profession and you think about being a sommelier. If you still ask, why should I be a sommelier? Why can't the person sitting to my left or right should be a sommelier? Then I think the answer is very simple. You've got to do it for yourself. Do you want to start your career with 15, 20,000 rupees salary, or do you want to start at 20, 40,000 rupees? Do you want to be doing 14 hours, 16-hour shifts, or do you want to do an 8-hour shift? Do you want to wear a service jacket, or do you want to wear a tailor-made suit? Do you want to be clearing trays, or do you want to be serving a bottle of wine, beer, whiskey, or something of that sort? Do you want to be at the back of the house polishing cutlery, or do you want to be in the front of the house talking to your VIP guests? Do you want to kickstart your career now, or wait for it for another 2 years? This is a decision that you do. And more importantly, you don't have to do it for your parents. You don't have to do it for your faculty. You don't even have to do it for the industry. You've got to do it for yourself. So yeah, figure it out. If you wish to do it, we guys are here. Somebody held my hand and told me that you could be a sommelier, and they made me one. And I'll be more than happy if I could do that for somebody else. So yeah, cheers to that.
Thank you, Gagan sir. So
I'll add something here, Gagan sir, about Gagan sir. I remember meeting him during my first year job at Banasda's Chandiwali.
I remember that. Yeah.
So it was actually a very interactive event, interactive session. He was talking about the experience he has had till now, and it's great to see both of you together. I remember Magandeep's sir show that around the world in 80 plates. It's an inspiration for me. Actually, that is a place where we learn to communicate with people. So it's been a learning session being in touch with both the people. Sir, back to you.
Madan sir and Gagan sir have shared with us right now, like the journey of a sommelier, how it starts and how it takes the levels after one another. I really hope after this session, many of our attendants may change their the mindset and they like rethink about the profession of F&B professional, and especially when we talk about the F&B service, it's just not only a serving of a beverage or the meal to the guest and taking care of the guest. It's much more beyond that, but we are all observing right now. And so really a wonderful session, sir. I just want to know one thing, like if you can just guide us, like, especially of our attendees, especially those who are joining this session after clearing school. So, like, we have observed those who are working in the industry in F&B service, like wine bar is like a blind tasting of a wine. When we introduce a wine, any new wine is launching in the market, so there is a blind tasting of that. So I have observed that like in my industry, like a blind tasting of like 10, 5, 10, 15 brands of a wine who are just covered, with a wrap and the sommelier or the wine specialist, they just judge wine and they just pick out some of the bottles. Okay, this is the bottle which we okay sell this, or you can just put it in this category. So is there like something like that also nowadays? It's a blind tasting.
If I'm sorry, I don't quite get. Is there a question there? Because to me, it sounded like a nice remark about blind. What is the
It's
question
like
exactly?
how we do the blind. Actually, a blind testing is what actually blind testing is.
A blind tasting is generally if you give a glass of wine and if you have to guess from the what inside the glass what could where things like where is the wine from, how old is it, what could be the grape, how it was vinified and aged. Those are the things you will try and guess, no, not guess, but deduce from tasting the wine. All right. Now remember, just guessing the grape is only 1 mark out of 20. Getting the other things right about maybe the price segment it would fall into, the quality of winemaking, the quality of oak, presence of oak. Those are things you do that. Now, the blind tasting is done for various reasons. In a competition, it's done to figure out how good a taster as a person is and how vast their knowledge is. But for a new product, a blind tasting is done to see if consumers like it. So you change your target market. You'll have trade people tasting, consumers tasting, men of a certain age, women of a certain age tasting to see whether they respond to it well or not. But that is all about a product, qualification. And but blind tasting for a sommelier is done more to understand, to help them expand their understanding of taste and knowledge. Because very often, also remember, we get influenced by the label. If I give you a very big hand blown crystal glass and I charge you and I tell you the wine was costing some 50,000 rupees, you will think the wine's great, but it would actually be 500 rupee bottle of wine. So I need to make sure we take away this aura from the equation. So blind tasting helps.
So just one thing, like if you like tell something about the characteristics of a wine who are attendees, those who are new. Basically, they don't have a much knowledge about the wine. Just a few one, like it has a vanilla, the aroma or a
It's too
citrus.
big a jump. It'll be too big a jump to make right now because I can't just launch 5 words at them and say they become wine tasters. I'd advise them to start slowly. First, read up on wine in basics, understand where it happens, where it comes.
Motivates them, yeah.
Again, you have any answer there?
No, I think it's just an ocean of study, quite honestly. And even if we take a drop out of it, I think and just pass it on to somebody, it will never be enough. We have invested. Magan sir has invested, I think, more than 2 decades doing this.
Exactly. It's long
after
journey.
20 years, you say pick 5 words. I think it's possible. Yeah.
So, just want to ask us very simple question. Being an Indian, we are used to those those heavy amount of spices. So, how do you maintain that the tongue, the delicateness? We have taste about 40 different flavors in a single wine. So, how do you maintain your palate? How do you maintain that tongue?
losing taste is a medical condition right now, exacerbated by the presence of the pandemic called COVID-19. When you lose your taste, but apart from that, if you lose zinc in your palate, you will lose your sense of taste. Outside of that, it's only a sensitivity threshold, which means, and I know Gagan and I are a bad example because we have a very low threshold for spices. That is not the case per se. We have friends in the industry like Sanjay Menon who from south of Kerala, he can have extremely spicy food. He's one of the most prolific tasters I know. So your tasting capabilities do not get compromised because you're eating spices. However, if you're smoking a cigarette and eating spice and trying to taste at the same time, then there might be an effect. Generally, if you're
Okay.
having spicy food, fine, there's no problem. You can take the spice. I know we can't take the spice, so for us the pairing goes all over the place. But if you can take the spice, never doubt your capabilities. If I can come from a Singh background, he can come from a Pandit Sharma background and become a sommelier. Then anybody can become a sommelier. There is absolutely no problem there. It's just that you have to be open to the idea. We keep thinking the French eat bland food, so they are better tasters. Average French person doesn't know how to taste wine either. They are as clueless as any next Indian. So don't worry about spices.
Magan sir, you started like 15, 20 years back. How did you decide to become a sommelier at that point of time?
For me, it was very personal, the love for the French language. I wanted to speak French like the French do. I wanted to make it my second language. So instead of going to the US to study, I ended up going to actually Vatel in Nîmes. That's where I started studying. But the course was in English, but I used to work at the college, which was in French. And from there, when I went for my apprenticeship, it was all in French, and it gave me enough knowledge to speak the language. At which point, things happened that I wanted to switch to wine because they said you can speak French, but you don't speak it like the French do. And to do that, you have to understand food and wine very well because it's very intrinsic to their culture, which is when I saw a sommelier course at the university and I decided to go for it. And here the course was in postgraduate level French. It was really tough to do because you had to answer everything, dissertations, everything, the viva, everything was in French. But I managed somehow. So yeah. So that's how my career got into wines, so to say.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, Deepak.
Some questions here as well in the Q&A bit. If you want to have them.
Yes, yes.
The first one, I need to travel. Is it a good profession? I think Gagan already mentioned that you will get to travel a fair bit. On a normal calendar, Gagan and I have already missed about 2-3 trips this year just in this lockdown because we would have been at least somewhere or the other. But now because the lockdown, obviously we're all stranded sort of. And India has good salaries. This is Talish asking about salaries in India for sommeliers. I think you can have very good salaries. You just need to apply yourself and remember it's very competitive out there. And remember, if you want a good salary, Gagan explained to you, you have to at least try and account for 10 times of your salary as revenue. So you can't expect 50,000 rupees if you can't bring in 500,000 rupees of business to your outlet. So you need to be cognizant of how businesses work, and then you'll understand why the salaries are possible. At least it gives you an option of making more money versus having a regular job as a server, which is fixed. You might get tips at an entry level, but your rise will be much slower. But with a sommelier, you can go much faster through the beverage route and get into the corporate circles as well. Gagan, I've got a question. I'm going to throw this your way. How do you tell when wine grapes are ripe and ready for harvesting? How underripe and overripe grapes affect the final outcome of a wine?
Where are these questions? I can't. Oh, it's
Gagan,
actually,
if you click
it's
on the three dots,
it's in a different
if you click
box.
on the three dots,
Yeah, I didn't see it. Okay.
So I just read out. So how do you tell when wine grapes are ripe and ready for harvesting? How do unripe and overripe grapes affect the final outcome of a wine?
Right.
This is a
So,
question from our attendee Tara Nandini.
so Tara, I think this is a technical question. So ripeness, much like maturity in people, is a very subjective matter. You could be very old and be immature, or you could be very young and things might have happened in your life which would have made you matured rather sooner. I remember when my father passed away, I matured like this. Before that, I was just like a little bit of a rebel. So same thing happens with grapes as well. I think ripeness, by technical terms, there's no chemical level which tells you that this is what is ripe. It depends on what you're trying to make. So the same, if in case we were to talk about in Chef Sunil's language, If you were to have underripe tomatoes, green tomatoes, you can make a gazpacho, but try and do that with overripe red tomatoes, you will not be able to make very good one out of it. Similarly, with wines as well, the raw material is what will give you the end product. So ripeness, underripe grapes, there are some for if in case you want to make sparkling wines, underripe grapes are better for you. If you want to make dessert wines, then of course, more ripe the grape there is, it will become raisin and it will become highly sweet. So you will be able to make better sweet wines. So ripeness is a very subjective matter. What might be ripe for one winemaker might not be ripe for the other one. And does the ripeness level affect the final outcome of the wine? Definitely does.
So the floor is open for question and answer for all our panelists. You can write and discuss with the Gagan sir and Magan sir. Any
Magan sir,
doubt,
meanwhile, I
anything you
can
want to
ask a
ask?
question.
Yeah, go for it.
Sir. What mistakes do the restaurants make when they are serving or selling their wines?
I think the biggest mistake that restaurants make is that they try to upsell without understanding what is the budget or need of the hour for the client. So you walk into a restaurant and you sit down and the person shows you the wine list at the wrong page, some 50,000 rupee bottle of wine. Or when you've sort of pointed at wines at 5,000 rupees, they show you wines at 12,000. I think that's one big mistake they make. The other thing that men, I think, and this is more, I know it's a gender thing, that men as sommeliers make as a mistake is they are very keen to sell what they want to sell and they don't end up listening to what the consumer wants to buy. So often that disconnect leads to a discord and the consumer will then finally do away with the advice of the sommelier. Women here are always more intuitive, and in the ISC we've seen that in the live segments that women will answer to the needs of the consumer much better. Again, it's not a skill that men can't acquire or excel at, but it seems to just be beyond them for the time being. But that's where I think hotels and restaurants mess up. They try to push wines which are not in touch or in sync with what the consumer possibly wants at that moment.
Thank you.
So can you just throw some light, like for upcoming professionals, like how can they start or they can plan their career if they want to like become a sommelier in the very early stage of after just passing on from the school. So after nowadays everyone is having the knowledge and access to to get the things what is happening and what is good for them and how they can go to the next level. So what they need to do, like some tips for the student, like those who want to become a sommelier and they want to spend the time for like to become a sommelier and skill only.
It's not
So how they can
studying,
go for
use it
that?
to be studying. I think Gagan already shared and showed the screen to you with what we have done as an effort to put things out there which are very practical and won't come at a cost that'll kill you. But do read as much as you can. Maybe see some videos if you can. Acquire knowledge, because right now is the time to hustle and acquire the knowledge which you can use later when the practical time begins. It will be a waste if we sit at home, acquire something new which is going to help us in the future. So get the certificates, but get practically oriented certification, I'd say. So don't get just theoretical knowledge which will sit with you and has no more value today than it does 6 months down the line. So you're not doing a PhD in wines, you're doing a practical course in wines. So okay, if you want to do a PhD, by all means do that. It's a very honorable thing to do. But if you want to work as a sommelier, it's a practical field. So at the end of the day, right now, because you can't apply the practicals, learn the knowledge which can convert to practical prowess later. That's what I would give as a simple advice.
So, Sarsa, if in case I could add here, why start a skill after school? We have had defense professionals and heart surgeons and Supreme Court lawyers come to us who have now acquired more wine knowledge, at least practical wine knowledge, than I personally have. They know about brands and crews and all that much more now as compared to probably what I can cough up within a second. So I think sommelier definitely is one of those professions which is, although a part of hospitality, you don't have to do hotel management to become a sommelier. Earlier in the days, of course, sommelier courses were not there in India, so we knew that getting into hotel management is the only option that we had. I mean, I graduated in 2007, I guess. There was no wine course in India, no sommelier course except a mixology course. There was no other beverage course available. So you don't have to, if you are out of, fresh out of school, you don't want to do hotel management, you can still study wines, visit wineries, go to wine tastings as a consumer as well, show real passion, learn the skill, and go and apply for a job in a hotel. You might not know how housekeeping works, you might not know how hotel engineering works, but a sommelier is not really required to do that. So I think that is one thing, and that is the reason why I said that a lot of people whose job is to be a lawyer or a doctor or a defense professional, they've gone on just out of passion and curiosity to be of some really good authority in the wine field even today. I mean, I can name a few, but these are people travel a lot. They have good palate, they have good pockets, and sommeliers are a little afraid going and talking to them because they have that sort of
I'll add something here. I remember the first session I had with both of you. You got me stuck on Lambrusco at that time, and I'm still stuck on that.
Yeah.
I still go to defense colony, or defense store, and pick up that whenever I'm there in the market. So
Yeah.
that is still there. Okay, and the other note, we got a question from the panelist. In India, the wine culture is not as strong as compared to beer and spirits. So, what kind of future sommelier has in India?
There are no apprentices, there are no apprentice programs.
Pardon? The wine culture is not that strong as compared to beer and other spirits. So, what kind of future are the sommeliers looking at?
So here's the answer in very short, guys. So Scotch or whiskey came to India in the early 20th century, 1901 to 1907 is when it starts coming in. Fast forward 100 years, we are the largest whiskey consuming nation in the world. Where
Yes.
even if you include molasses whiskey, we are still very crazy about whiskey as a category. And that took 100 years in an era of no communication, right? Things will not take that long. The problem is we end up comparing ourselves to countries where wine has existed for over 2,000 years. So it is not a good comparison. If you want to compare Indian food with French cuisine, you realize we are absolutely at par, if not better, in many ways, in a statistical manner. Wine for us is that. There's nothing wrong with it. We have all the time, and I assure you that in my 2 decades that I've seen teams, in a decade more, only taking on the bigger countries. Remember, US, the entire population of the country is 350 million. It is still smaller than the middle class in India. And if the middle class starts to find, you can outdrink every American citizen on 1:1 just because of the numbers here. But it needs time. It needs people to get the message across. People like Gagan and only train 20 people at a time or 50 people at a time. But if those 50 join the industry, they communicate to 50,000. And that's where awareness and education happens. So it's not impossible. Remember, if Scotch could do it in 100 years, wine can easily do it in much lesser. Just look at the beer revolution. From a time you were only drinking Kingfisher and Kalyani Black Label to suddenly having so many micro brands and micro breweries, it's barely 15 years. So in 15 years, we've gone from no beer to over 1,000 beer brands in between microbreweries and breweries. Wine will be the same story.
I just would like to add to it, sir. About 10 years back, I've got this opportunity to spend 2 days at Grover Zampa Vineyards at Bangalore, around Bangalore. So it was quite a great experience. And at that time, it was more about food and wine pairing. And there was some wheel that is coming with some spices mentioned. So the aftertaste, how it gets paired with the actual food components. But now what I'm seeing is a lot of uh, whiskey companies, a lot of spirit companies are pairing their spirits with actual Indian food that is very robust and very strong when it comes to spices and marinations. So I don't think so. It's very limited to wine. Earlier, it was just wine sommeliers, and I guess there are a lot of other sommelier professions, add-on professions that is coming up with very fast pace, if I should say. So, what do you have to say about it? Because Indian food was not at all in line when it comes to food, and it was more of a European food, a French food, wherein we used to pair it with wine because we know the components actually. But when it comes to Indian food, there's a lot of intricacies that goes into it, and nowadays we are pairing it. Our spirits and our wines and whiskeys with Indian food. So, what do you have to? How difficult it is to pair a wine or a whiskey with an Indian starter or an Indian main course?
I'll give the short answer. Gagan can give you more. Maybe for me, the shortest answer is it's as difficult as your brain tells you. If you are mentally locked to it, it won't happen. If you are mentally open to it, it's absolutely possible. So I've often had wine, but not just wine. I've had all sorts of drinks next to a homemade bhindi. So not even talking butter chicken and kebab kind of food, just home food, and having from a Australian Semillon to various wines. So it's as limited as your brain allows you to believe. Gagan, you want to add anything else to that, which sort of expands it?
Listen,
Wines.
what what the webinar was about is that the repertoire of a sommelier is not only wines, but it has gone to other things, which is I think exactly what you're saying, that earlier we only used to see wine pairings, now we're seeing cocktail pairings and beer pairings and whiskey pairings. That is because the definition of the profession has changed. That's one. And I think if you were to see the history of the civilization, grapes were always there, wines were always made. For making whiskey, you have to go through a very long process, and whiskey came a little later. But by that time, human civilization already adapted to the idea of drinking wines because food would spoil, and we did not know HACCP at that time and all of those things. We didn't have refrigerators. We did not know how to, cook a chicken properly. So we were eating what we were eating. Our water was not pure. We were not doing RO and UV and UF on that. So we were eating and drinking what we were doing, and we were consuming that, and we were flushing it down with alcohol, which would kill all the germs. So the oldest form of alcohol was always wine. And that's why wine and food has become something which human civilization has survived on. Whiskey always has come as a something that gives you the courage so that you can go and battle and wars and all that stuff. So of course, it now can come into the society as something that we can play with. But earlier in the days, wines were always supposed to be an antidote that you would consume with your food just to stay alive. And I think that's why the relationship of food and wine should always remain, no matter how far into civilization we go.
Just a second question out of curiosity.
Sorry.
According to you, what has a better taste and an aftertaste or a flavor? Is it the wines that has a cork attached to it, or if you can say the old world wines are more matured, or the one that comes with just a cap? Because I'm sure there's a lot of difference, but yes, according to you, which is the better one?
So I'm going to make it a bit personal. Are you married?
Yes, sir.
Wife wears a dress, or if she wears a sari, is she prettier in one and not the other?
No, sir.
Right? Never.
Difficult to answer.
Ideally, a screw cap or a cork are just the apparel on the bottle, and you should, as us, and that's where a blind tasting would help. We should discount it completely from our conversations as pros, because it's just closure. And scientifically, one is definitely more efficient, the other is more romantic. Where emotion comes into play, you would want to uncork something to feel the moment maybe better. But when I've really relished trips through Austria, Australia, Germany, where I didn't even need to carry a wine opener, and I never felt the loss for it, because it was very practical to have screw caps. When I'm opening bottles at home right now, I love it when it's a screw cap, because if I don't drink the whole bottle, it's easy to shut and put back in the fridge and go back to it the next day. With the cork, I'm looking for a stopper or figuring out what to do if the cork didn't come out right. So I won't say, as Gagan said, a lot of things happen because of the way time has made them. Cork was available as a bark of a tree, screw caps weren't around. So today we have technology, we shouldn't not use it. So that's the only logic. So think of all these things, the label, the bottle shape, all this is just garnish. If I strip all of that and I leave the liquid inside in a glass and you're blind tasting it, would you still like it? Then screw cap doesn't matter.
So basically, it does not
like
affect
plastics.
the quality of wine remains same. So it doesn't matter screw cap or a wooden cork.
I mean, off the record, I can share there are experiments done with some of the top houses in the world where they've bottled wines for 2 decades with a screw cap and a cork, and they found the screw cap to be fresher at the end of 2 decades. But it doesn't mean they'll change just yet, because some of those wines age for 100 years. So they don't know after 2 decades, they know it's fine. But what happens after 70 years, they don't know yet. The other reason is cork is open to a lot of defects. But a screw cap also, if it's bumped from the outside, can shift and move. And remember, screw cap is also improving its technology. So what you had as screw caps 5 years ago today are drastically different in quality. So they are not sure if they want to shift just yet. But having said that, experiments are on, and a lot of people have shifted, and they keep improving the screw cap every year also.
So we still have a coffee with this.
We still have a.
I have one question. Gagan, I
Yes,
have one
please.
question. What is appellation contrôlée?
All yours, Gagan. For you.
Sir, quite honestly, I mean, if you were to translate it, it just basically means appellation is a word for law or regulation. Let's just say it, because law sounds a little more archaic. Regulation, control, as the word suggests, appellation control basically means a regulation which puts a control in the way you would operate within a system, so that a certain wine style or a recipe or a quality is guaranteed. So, for example, you might know a cognac needs to be aged for a minimum of 2 years before it can be called a cognac, because you expect a certain flavor. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure ITC has an appellation control on their dal bukhara that it must be made for a certain recipe for certain hours before it can be
Standard
brought to
recipe.
dal. Otherwise, it goes either to staff quarters or the buffet in banquets or at the coffee shop. So it's just basically, a charter that defines quality, basically steps like an SOP, right? Defines a system which basically suggests that if you follow this, a certain quality and a certain recipe, a certain identity of the liquid is can be achieved. You follow it. It's just quite honestly, sir, it's poor. Uh, just because a wine has AOC, AOP, DOC, DOCG written on it doesn't mean that it is high quality. It just means theoretically they did everything as the letter said.
Thank you.
So just one thing adding in this, like in India, we have wine laws for other countries also. So India, what we are following, like for the Indian wines, basically, like we have Grover, Sula, a lot more on here. So what the law we are following on that, like?
So I think it's a very interesting question. Let me attempt to answer this. What happened earlier in the days, as per when winemaking started, when the Romans started making wines in Italy and France, they grew everything everywhere. There was no technique used. There was no, knowledge used, because they were just, in a way, shooting in the dark and trying to hit the bullseye. So they grew everything everywhere, and then they realized that this grows better here. So we are just going to work with this. This works better here, and that's what we're going to do. So, for example, in Champagne, they realized we make better sparkling wines here, so we just want to make sparkling wines. In Burgundy, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir works. We don't want Cabernet, we don't want Shiraz, so on and so forth for various countries and regions. And then they realized that in our region, if everybody was to grow Chardonnay, our expression of Chardonnay is this, which is what we want to, show. Some people would say, no, we as a region do not have forests, so we can't get oak, so we would not use oak. Some people said, oh, we have very good soil, so we are going to make soil-based oak-aged wines and all that. So India, as of right now, I think the oldest still existing winery is Grover Vineyards, which I think was established in 1988. Less than 30 years of experience. Majority of the wines that you see today, including Sula, would barely be 20 years old. I think Sula was made in 97, so we are talking about, a little over 20 years. But then all the other wineries have had less than 10 to 15 years of experience. We are yet to understand what the soil is, what the climate is, how does the plant works, and all of that stuff before we as a nation can say, this is the recipe we will follow, this is the wine style we will follow, and this is the law that will create for that recipe. So for a 1,000-year-old country, or let's say a 200-year-old country like like in Australia or Chile and Argentina, it makes sense. For a 20-25-year-old country where majority of the winemakers have had less than 10 to 15 years of practical experience on that vineyard, to create laws is, I think, a little too early. You know how, if in case you have kids, for a 10-year-old kid and for a 30-year-old boy, the rules are different. It's pretty much the same.
So there is one question in the chat box, like Mr. Rajat Singh wants to ask, like, please let us know if there is any apprentice program in Indian wineries or distilleries.
There are some programs in Indian wineries. I think Sula runs an internship program, and I know York also has started that. But do remember, with alcohol and age, it's a balance that India has not figured out just yet. I think 25 years of age should start drinking alcohol. I think you have so much stress in life by that time, you are already an addict. So if the law says you should start drinking alcohol at 25, yeah, it doesn't help. So sometimes it becomes a little bit of a legal issue that does a person who is under a certain age, can they be present at the premise of a distillery or a winery? That is something that you will have to check. But yes, there are some internship programs.
So I think the answer to this question: how does the different types of wood used in making of a storage barrel change the taste of wine? Question by Tarun. And just want to ask the formula, like what exactly if there is any formula for that particular the process, the changing of a taste of a wine by putting in the wood barrels, and how it works actually.
It's having to do much like cooking pulao in a microwave or making biryani in another pot. That's I think that's what it is. So different woods, sandalwood and mango wood, and all of these woods, they have different flavors and textures to them. Wood has a different one. So that is what it is. So imagine keeping a liquid in that, how it will impact. Technical part of it, I think you'll have to do a wine course to understand all of it.
We have a question coming in from Mr.
Back in the
Swaroop.
wine group. Yeah.
So Swaroop had a question: difference between the old world and new world wine. How do we find that out?
So I'll combine a few questions here because there's another question talking about barrels and old world and non-aged and aged. Guys, the thing is this: it's. I mean, if I say anything short within 10 seconds, it'll be too generalized and wrong. Because today, remember, the world is not that polarized anymore. It's not that there is French wine and Australian wine. Today, there's a French winemaker who grows up in Italy, studies in California, settles down in Australia, and makes wine with southern Italian grapes. So, how do you place his wines when you taste them? You can't. Okay. So, that's why it's very difficult to typecast things. But in general, you can say the old world had a certain philosophy which is based more on the regions and having a recipe of a wine wherein they'd mix things together. So grapes might be blended. In the new world, they initially started by doing grapes. But today you find it's mixing. California has regions defined for their grapes. Australia does regional heroes, which certain areas do particular grapes. And in France, they're mixing things in the south. So there is no, basically, the words always, never, formulaic are bad in wine. They don't work. Okay.
And favorite.
So just, sorry?
And favorite and best.
And favorite and also their favorite is your favorite, my favorite, his favorite, that's fine. But best is a really bad word. So the best way to age a wine, best wine in this, on that day, in that hour, it would be the best wine. But 10 minutes later, it could change. And the same with oak aging and stuff. The influences are many. So again, I can't sum up here because from American oak to French oak to Slavonian oak to Hungarian oak to big barrels to small barrels to the peepash, depending on what kind of oak, how old or new it is, and how long you age it, and what you age in it, everything changes. So there are too many variables for me to sum up and say oak makes wine woody. It's not going to happen like that all the time. Sometimes oak will just be used to store a wine. When you have barrels that are 50 years old, they don't do much to the wine by virtue of tannins. They just hold the wine and keep it kind of tight there. But again, I'm not saying that the question's wrong. It's just that it's beyond the scope of this webinar for me to answer it. I would need at least 2 hours to completely give an idea. It's a whole presentation that Gagan and I will do to get the idea of oak clarified. But in a very broad sense, if you use French oak, you get black label sort of notes like a whiskey. Extrapolate that to wine. If you use American oak, you get bourbon, Jack Daniel kind of notes. I'm talking about whiskeys, I know, because the difference is very stark. Use the same metaphor for wine, so smoky, toasty versus vanilla, pineapple, tropical. That's my sort of way of putting it. Gagan, you want to sort of, you said that about old world, new world, and oak or no oak age?
I think in general, when we do blind tastings, and Mr. Anjum was also asking about it earlier, the basic understanding is that earlier in the days, the winemakers, again, it's just hit and trial and just how, civilizations have come by. They were growing everything, and what they were saying was that we don't know how to individually do that. So they would put it together. And the idea was not to show what the land shows or what the grapes show, but what I, as a winemaker, can show. And that was the idea earlier. Now with the new with the new world, what they are saying is they take a wine book, they flip the chapters, and they say, okay, Chardonnay is supposed to have these flavors. They grow a Chardonnay. They say, I'm not going to be responsible if in case this is not a nice Chardonnay. The book says the Chardonnays are supposed to have these flavors. That is what I'm going to do. So the new world wines, I think, have more identity towards the place and the grape variety versus the old world wines where the idea was predominantly to show what I as a winemaker can create. Now this theoretically may or may not make sense, but once you have 10 wines sitting in front of you, then you can understand this much better. Of course, as Magan sir also said, there are international winemakers now. They travel to place like India, which by all means is a new world country. And they can produce wines with an old world style. Like for example, Grover's La Reserve is a great example of that. They started making wines, but it was made by a French gentleman. They made it in that blended, oak oriented, what I can do sort of a style rather than what a Cabernet Sauvignon, what a Shiraz could do. But now you go and see winemakers in Nasik or in Karnataka, their Chardonnay tastes like a Chardonnay, their Sauvignon Blanc tastes like a Sauvignon Blanc, and there's an influence of what I as a producer can. So I think that is one divide that we utilize as a benchmark when we are blind tasting to figure out if this is a new old wine or an old.
So, Mr. Verma, Dean of Kerala, know like about Jodi or is he saying a Jugal Bandi? Like,
Sir, I think we should unmute him.
You have
Sir, I think I'll unmute him.
yes, please, Verma sir.
I'll just unmute him. Give me a second.
It's a fun question.
Verma sir?
Yeah, true.
Verma sir, you're unmuted?
Verma sir? Verma sir from KR Mangalam University.
Verma sir? No, I don't think he's able to speak. Verma sir, you there?
Yes, I am there, but I am unable to mute it.
His volume is very low.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, sir.
Yes, sir. We are discussing your question only. So we thought you are the right one who can just ask that question directly to
Yes.
sir and Magan sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
You are audible.
Verma sir, we can hear you.
I guess time constraint. I guess
Yes, I think we should finish the question.
have the question directly, so you can just ask the
Yes.
question.
Sir, please go on with the question.
So, sir is asking like he wanted to know about like you that how both have taken the decision to come this profession and make this jugal jodi of Gagan and Magan. Normally, we heard such combination in music and the name itself is very attractive and powerful. A matter of people to think it over this have one. Please throw some light on it. Magan sir.
It requires a Urdu poetry answer.
No, you came first. You should be responsible.
Red wine makes you lose hair is all I can say. That's why Gagan and I are here. Names were totally coincidental. That's all I can say. I think I'm glad it's us and not someone else. That's all.
Gagan sir, something from your side?
How do you answer this question? So this is just complete coincidence that the names are similar, the hairstyle is similar, the profession is similar. There's no
The name is similar as well.
it's just complete coincidence.
Any other question from our panelist side and from our attendees?
Sir, may I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
How beneficial it is for a hospitality professional, but not an F&B service professional, to go for a WSET online course? Is it beneficial? The second level, is it beneficial, the WSET second level online course, for a hospitality professional, but a non-F&B service.
Okay, like if you want to go for that particular course, so can you go for that basically?
See, if in case you're a hospital, if you're a non-serving professional, then you can do any course for that matter, right? But how does it matter what course you're doing online or offline? The only concern right now is, and this is sort of like a little bit of an ethical concern here that WSET, as far as we know, we stopped doing WSET courses, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago. There are two things. First thing, let's just understand this. WSET as a course does not teach you pronunciation or service. This is let's just look at it as a language course that teaches you how to talk about wine. It doesn't teach you how to serve wines in a hotel. It doesn't teach you how to make wines. It just tells you how to talk about it and taste it as well. So any which way doing WSET is a non-hospitality course. It's not going to make you a better server. They do not even give you they're not going to give you a decanter, a Gueridon trophy. They'll never teach you what happens if in case a cork breaks or a guest rejects a wine which they ordered by the bottle. They do not teach you all of that. So it's not a hospitality course. Your parents, my parents, my nephew who's 8 years old can do this course and still be a hospitality professional. Now, this is as simple as this. So you can go keep on doing that. The second thing is right now with the online courses, WSET does not teach you service. What does it teach you? It teaches you tasting. Now, with the online courses, you can't learn tasting any which way. Right? It's very simple. You can't taste. Change the glass of the wine, and the wine will be different. Change the glass of the wine, it will be different. So you can't teach tasting online, and that's the reason why, at least current scenario, to do an online wine course that permanently charges you for a wine tasting, charges you 25,000-30,000 rupees, which is predominantly the cost of the wine and the banquet and the lunches that are, served in the 3 days. It is of no value whatsoever. If you want to do an online course, do an online course where you are not charged for tasting. Because you pay for a tasting and then you have to go and buy your own bottle, it just becomes further expensive.
Madan sir, may I ask a question, sir?
I mean, yes, that's what we're here for.
In a restaurant, like, what are some good questions to ask a sommelier if one is not familiar with the wines on the menu?
I think more than asking the question, the first thing to do is to tell them what budget is that you're willing to spend. I think that's the first thing to establish very clearly with the sommelier. And then the next thing to do, if you can do it, is maybe tell them things that you've tried and not enjoyed. So if you, let's say, tried a Chardonnay and you don't like Chardonnay with oak, say that. Because telling a person what you like is a good way to progress, but telling them what you don't like is a very easy way to eliminate other things. So if you don't oaky Chardonnay, I might ask you a question: was it the wood? What was it that you didn't like? And I'll get an answer, and I'll eliminate many wines. It's easier to eliminate and find new things for you to try. But having said that, the first thing you should always do is give a budget there. And I know it sounds a bit iffy, but you should always establish a budget that you're willing to spend, because that makes it easiest for them to suggest wine. If they're not good enough to read your budget, there are many ways to do that, which we discuss otherwise. But if they're not good enough, it's good to establish it right out there from the start. So they're not telling you to drink Chateau Margaux when you just want to have a simple, easy red wine.
Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful session is going on. We have gathered a lot of information and knowledge about the world of wine, especially with specialists like Magan sir and Gagan sir. And I really like it's been a, maybe like most of us like we came to know about such growing career and the achievements we have and opportunities we have basically in the field of and then we want to become sommelier. Like you have discussed, you have shown the images of our personalities. How many have they changed their life after participating in winning a sommelier championship and having a successful growing career in beverage industry? So it motivates the upcoming professionals and the budding hoteliers to make their career, and they think on to other side of the coin, like F&B service is something else also apart from serving in a restaurant. So it's like a great session, sir. I think we are now come to the end of our webinar. After answering all our questions, you have answered all questions of our panelists and our attendees very well. With the full experience and the very technical language we have used for that, clearing all the issues and question and answer. So I would like to thank all my attendees and panelists who are attending this webinar and hope all have noted something new related to the wine and beverage field. And of course, how to become a sommelier. Now it's easy to decide how to become a sommelier. Thank you so much, Magan sir and Gagan sir, for making this evening memorable and sparing your time from your busy schedule. We will try to organize such session for our lovely audience and colleagues, panelists in future as well. After this webinar, I think it is easy to plan how to set the next level in the field of wine and what all is required to achieve success in the the industry like we call a wine industry. Thank you so much once again, everyone, and looking forward for our next webinar at Water Hotel and Business School. Till the time, stay safe and stay connected. Sunil sir, I would like to. Yes, sir. So, like Garima ma'am, I think she's busy.
Yeah, she had to leave for another meeting. So, must say, Magandeep sir and Gagan sir, it's been like
Thanks,
back in time, seeing you after such a long time. It's been a lovely interaction. We're going to be expecting you in our campus. So once you open up, we'll send you an invite for the very same thing. And thank you for the inspirational session. I'm sure a lot of people have learned. We have got students in this group right now, right across from our first year to the pass out batch. They have been here right from the beginning till the end. We had more than 300 people who were registered for this event. That's a huge number, I must say. And probably we'll have another. We actually planned for a course along with this member when you were in the campus last time. We had planned a course for our students, and we're definitely going to have it once we go back to the campus. Right?
And we'll have the few workshop with you when everything will be normal, and we'll definitely put in a curriculum like some workshop on a wine, beverages, and so that it helps students to
Gagan shared the details in the email.
Yes.
You guys have questions, use the number, use the email, look at the 52 drinks. Guys, there's a lot of information. As I said, use this time to gain knowledge. There's a lot of it out there for free anyways, and we are doing a lot of it constantly every week. Use that to your advantages, guys.
Will do, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gagan.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
See you soon, sir. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.